Hi, it's Heather Hallgrimson, Director of Entrepreneurship with Cooperatives First. This webinar, Aging in Place, Seniors Housing in Rural Communities, was recorded on November 16, 2022. I hope you enjoy it. To check out all of our webinars, just go to cooperativesfirst.com/webinars. Okay, so we're recording, and I just wanted to take a moment to introduce today's topic, which is aging in place, seniors housing in rural communities. So aging in place really means having access to the services and the health and social supports you need to live safely and independently in your home community for as long as you're able. So I just grabbed that definition sort of off the Government of Canada website. So, and I think a lot of people wish to remain in their houses for as long as possible, but we did talk about earlier with the panelists how there's kind of a mismatch between potentially the housing and the responsibilities and the kind of the sides of the yard and stuff that people have versus the sort of housing needs that they get as they get older. So what we're talking about here is trying to match up the needs of the people in the community who want to stay in the community with the actual real housing options in that community. So there's two people we're talking to today, two panelists who are making strides to make sure that they have the housing options that they need in their community. So I'm going to just, again, like I said, I'm going to have, thanks so much for putting lots of introductions in the chat. I really appreciate that. I want to first introduce Monique to come up and share a little bit about the project that she's been a part of. And this is the part where I have to find Monique and pin her video. Where are you at? Okay. Oh yeah, that's going to be recorded. Great. Okay, Monique, welcome. I'm just pinning you up here. Thanks for joining and sharing with us today. I'm just going to introduce you really quick. So this project is in the RM of Piney, and Monique is the Economic Development and Tourism Manager at Sunrise Corner Tourism and Economic Development. So I just invite you to share a little bit more about the project itself before we jump into the panel, so we kind of have a base to build off of. So please share with us a little bit of background and what you kind of brought your community into working on this initiative. And I guess if you want to share kind of where it's at right now, that would be great as well. So please take it away.
Sure thing. So we're called the Southeast Community Services Co-op, and have been for about the last 2 years as a co-op. But the project started about 18 years ago with a local nonprofit called East Borderland Community Housing, pursuing I guess a three-phased approach for seniors housing, with independent living, then people would move into supportive housing, and then a personal care home. So that was the vision. They were successful at that time in working with Southern Health and Manitoba Housing and getting 15 independent living apartments built in 2012. Then a number of factors led to a complete standstill of the project. In 2019, EBCH approached the rural municipality of Piney for help in restarting the project, with a focus on an assisted living facility, which we're starting to call the Timberline Community Housing. The RM had in fact Kyle White of Cooperatives First at a provincial municipal convention and began investigating a co-op structure. At the same time, our local Piney Regional Chamber of Commerce had housing on their radar and could definitely see the value of providing a new housing option for seniors to free up homes for families to move to our region, where vacancy rates are very low in southeastern Manitoba. So with help from Cooperatives First, the three organizations being East Borderland Community Housing, Piney Regional Chamber of Commerce, and the RM of Piney, teamed up to form the Southeast Community Services Co-op, providing really a grassroots solution to affordable housing and other services. So as the Economic Development Manager for the RM of Piney and the neighboring RM of Sturburn, I serve as an advisor to the board. So we are still in the very early stages and have received a number of grants to develop a comprehensive business plan. We've conducted detailed market research, developed a website brochure, and we're working on a member recruitment and engagement initiative right now. We've just applied for CMHC seed funding to take next steps on site planning and architectural schematics on the property that is owned by East Borderland Community Housing. And, depending on fundraising, we're still, at least a couple of years out from breaking ground on this project, but working towards it.
Thanks, Monique. I'm just going to join you on the panel stage here. Thanks so much for that background. That really helps. I think that'll kind of ground us in our discussion later. So I'm just going to now invite Harvey to come up and share a little bit about, I think, projects, plural, that he's been a part of. And I opted out of getting some help tech support today. So I'm just the one lady show here. So just bear with me. Okay, Harvey, I see you up here. So just a quick introduction about Harvey. So he has worked to develop the seniors housing in Brandon, Manitoba. He's actually a board member and a resident of the Western Manitoba Seniors Nonprofit Housing Cooperative. So being part of a team that started the cooperative, applied for and obtained the mortgage and construction of the building. So that's years of work there. And has also worked and supported other housing initiatives in Manitoba. So I want to tell us a little bit about, I guess, how that project got started, and if you would like to kind of dip into some of the other projects that you work with as well.
Cooperative housing in Manitoba.
You're ready. If you're ready to go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Harvey. You're all ready to go.
No, it's basically an apartment building.
You're jumping around here anyway. Yes,
area.
Brandon is the second largest city in Manitoba. And in 2000, you go back quite a few years, Premier Selinger worked with our president, Deacon John McKenzie, in the development world when they were trying to help out Point Douglas. And at that time, Premier Selinger worked on his thesis, co-op development. Strangely, that happened in the 1960s. As we've gone forward, we've always found somebody that was interested in housing, and Brandon is certainly one of the ones that needed something for seniors. Seniors for Seniors just celebrated their 40th anniversary. They were an activity co-op, and they've been a strong supporter of the idea of housing that would be smoke-free and pet-friendly, which was totally not available in Brandon in the 2010s area. Also in October of 2010, there was a whole new council elected. Mayor Sherry Dector-Hurst won the award, and I won the seat. And strangely enough, Sherry and I had worked together on a project before 2000 at the Clark Hall renovation in the university. So it was kind of a nice thing to have somebody in your back, somebody interested in the same thing as what we were. I was also an employee of Manitoba government back in 1972-74, trying to help with the co-op development of self-help co-ops, who would 4 or 5 people would gather together, and they would help each other build their homes. So I've had a little bit of background knowledge for quite a while. In 2009 and 10, when we incorporated the Seniors for Seniors activity committee, studied the possibility of what was needed, and one of the decisions that was made that we would form a nonprofit housing co-op. 18 of us were nominated to the board at that time. We each threw $25 in the pot, and we sent the MLA Drew Caldwell off to Winnipeg to get us incorporated. So that was, once we were incorporated, of course, then we were told we had to find a piece of property to work on. And until Mayor Sherry Dector-Hurst was elected, we tried several different properties. And then the day after she was elected, she phoned me up and said, "When are you going to come and see me?" And that was the starting point where we had a promise that there would be a parcel of land of about approximately 8/10 of an acre on 620 McDermott Drive here. We had contacted a firm from Winnipeg, a self-help co-op from Winnipeg, known as DSI Tandem, who had spent 20 years at that time trying to help co-op development. And from there, we applied for CMHC for the $20,000 of seed funding. We got that. We got the the business plan put together, and then we applied to the Manitoba Housing for the 35% 15-year forgivable loan, and the extra $65,000 that was available for the development of the project. When those two hurdles were cleared, we then sent out a request for proposal for design build contractors who would be interested in designing what we needed and providing us with a finished contract price, which would, when we were ready, when we had enough members signed up with payment, and we had the financial arrangements made through the Westover Credit Union, they gave us the okay to go ahead and build. So March of 2012, they saw a whole bunch of us out here in the cold, watched them set up the first pile driver, start driving piles, and then we went over to Seniors for Seniors and declared the project started. 12 months later, about the end of March of 2013, we received the occupancy permit and were allowed to have people enter the building and live in the building starting on April the 1st. By the end of April, we had 70% of the suites occupied, and in the first 2 weeks of May, the other 30% moved in. So by the end of May, we were completely full. Plus, we had a waiting list by that time of another 50-some interested people. Every day since then, there has been more people added to that waiting list. It was 2013. In the summer, there was a by-election here, and there was another new councillor. So I phoned him up and congratulated him, and he said, "Would you be interested in another project?" Yes, we're interested in another project. So we worked through all those same procedures again in 2013, and we started the construction started on a 63-suite apartment block, which had 48 affordable units and 15 what was known as market suites. At the end of that was in 2017 that happened. In 2018, we opened the door for our second building with the 63 suites and giving us 97 suites of affordable housing, and an opportunity to serve community of Brandon with a very, very affordable housing. I think that's really the gist of what I would like to say, that it wasn't just Harvey Douglas. It was a combination of a lot of people that had been planned somewhere by a much higher power than any one of us. And the combination of that made our project successful.
Thank you, Harvey. I've just, we're going to move on now to a bit of discussion. So thank you so much for the background on both of those. That's excellent to hear some of that detail. So what we'll do too is, what I would like to do is invite anyone, as you think of any questions that you would want to ask in Q&A, just to put them in the chat, and I'll scroll back and find them if other things happen in the chat. I always think it's better to just put your question down in case you forget about it later, because I just unburden yourself in the moment, right? So we'll get around to a little bit of discussion, and I thought of a question actually that's a bit of a, one that I didn't prepare them for, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So sorry about that. I prep questions and then I just put different ones in. So just, I think we're all good with rolling with it. So, so we want to talk about in the panel part about priorities, because as we know, in working in local economic and community development, there are a lot of things you could be doing. And, we're all here gathered around seniors housing. I think it can be like, in this moment, I think it's like, okay, obviously, yes, this is a great initiative for both of the things that, we talk about wait lists and all this stuff. However, like in sort of like out there's going to be a lot of things that demand our time and attention. So talk about, Monique, we'll start with you. Talk about why this project was a priority for you and for your economic development, everyone involved.
Sure. I mean, I've been the economic development manager here for 3 years, and the only economic development manager they've ever had. They've never had that role filled in the past. And so my board and I got together and did a strategic plan. And one of the 5 pillars of what we were working on, or what we felt were most valuable to work on, was housing. And so this project, with an existing committee already working on it, who are, striving towards this for the last, 18 years, was a good fit for me to participate with and lend some time and expertise. The thought behind it is providing the appropriate housing for seniors where they're at. We currently have some independent living apartments, but that's it. It's like 15 independent living departments, and then no other options as people need additional care. So if we could provide that next level of care in assisted living, then we could certainly see seniors perhaps move out of their family homes into independent living apartments, and then when they needed more help, move into assisted living. So that aging in place as they worked through the level of care they needed. Then that frees up those family homes for families to move into, which supports our schools, supports our businesses, and keeps growing our region.
Great. Harvey, how would you say that this found its way into your scope of work?
Let's say I'm a carpenter by trade. I've spent my whole life working in the construction industry, both residential and larger commercial projects, which prepared me for some of the things that you have to deal with when you get into multi-million-dollar projects. But it was a timing. The time was right. I was born before 1940. So 2010, I'm approaching that magic age of needing a place that would be permanent. We knew when we met, we knew that we needed independent housing, which would provide opportunities for seniors to move into with a guaranteed income, be able to stay in that cooperative housing for a long time. We knew that there was a number of people that would step into care homes as a natural, and our dream was to build 3 buildings. First 2 independent living, and then the third one with more assisted living and whatnot. Well, we had a nice parcel of land that would have fit that, but it didn't work out. So we've done two buildings in 2 different areas, and we're now busy looking for the 3rd opportunity. Not only that, the buildings, being able to live in place, house in a building that has other seniors right beside you who are the same age. You can never feel lonely. You should never feel lonely. You should never feel isolated from the rest of the community. And we have built a little community right within the city of Brandon that takes part in the whole community. And that was and the other part of the aspect was that I understood that the caveat on the structure of a group with 0 equity buildings can feel more like living in an apartment building where you pay monthly rent, with the caveat being the rent is typically far, far cheaper than the market rent. And it gives you a chance to be able to take part in the management of management decisions, which was not available in any other accommodations in Brandon.
So our next question, I'm going to combine sort of my like out of left field question with the question that somebody asked in the chat, which is about how have local governments been involved in the creation of the housing cooperative? And the question that I wanted to ask as well is a little bit more nuts and bolts, is related to the sort of constellation of factors that allow for these things to happen, because there's a few things going on. There's funding or financing available, where that's coming from. Are there available funds? Is there government support? Are they supportive of the project? I mean, in terms of the second part of the question is about nonprofit part. I mean, nonprofit housing co-ops, I think, is the most common kind of housing cooperatives. So this is kind of just like a way to organize a kind of community owned like housing initiative. But I think the part is about the team that's okay. So what's kind of the right place, right time? How did all the pieces need to line up for this to happen? Because everybody I talked to said it's all about all the things kind of coming together at the right moment. There's government supports, there's financing available, there's the right people to champion and spearhead the project locally there, so all of that. So can you talk, and sorry, that was less of a question. So just talk about how that kind of all came together with each of your projects. Monique, you can go first.
Sure. Our project, has been sort of started almost 20 years ago. But 3 years ago, when the nonprofit, seniors housing organization came to the municipality to ask for help in kickstarting the project, we started a community services co-op. And so I guess we built the initial team from 3 perspectives: that nonprofit seniors housing organization, local business leaders through the Chamber of Commerce, and municipal guidance to help lead the getting things set up. And that included input from the economic development and community development perspective. This was just a starting point. We're set up as a community services co-op, so that with housing as our sort of flagship starter project, but lots of other things kind of working on in the background, like transportation. We are an hour from the nearest city. Transportation's an issue, so that's on our radar. Our East Borderland Community Housing has been fundraising for this for 20 years. They have committed, a significant amount of money as well as the land to this project. The municipality also has passed resolutions in the past supporting seniors housing of some sort. They go back to 20 years ago when they were looking at that 3-phased approach. So that commitment and concept to a housing facility is there. And then, of course, from an economic development perspective, we're always trying to help with funding from other directions. But as a nonprofit co-op that allows anyone to join as a member, not just residents, as that community services co-op, that's really helping us get support from all members of the community, and not just people who could potentially live there, although we have tons of support that way too.
How about you, Harvey?
Well, it's a tough one to explain, but if the stars don't line up, sometimes it's very difficult to get past any one of those steps. We have support. We have had support from the city in that they provided the land for this $1 plus expenses of development, which has made it possible for us to get a good 5% equity in the buildings right from square one. So the premier was interested in co-op development. The Minister of Housing was also interested in the development of cooperatives, was very interested. So we had the provincial assistance, and with the mayor and three or four of the councillors very excited about being able to do something to help this vacancy rate of less than 0.5% for 2-bedroom apartments was also a big help to us. The help we got from DSI Enterprises, DSI Tandem in Winnipeg was very beneficial, because they gave us the timeframes and the steps to go through, where to make our contacts so it was most beneficial. And also they had quite a bit of experience on development of properties. We were very fortunate through the request for proposals to get seven contractors that were interested in our first project. We whittled that down to 3 contractors on our second project. And so we felt we had very competitive bids, very competitive prices and whatnot. And that was the way we were able to, those helpers that would make the difference of us getting from point A to point C without having to spend 10 years waiting for somebody to put us in the right touch with people.
And I'm not sure. I want to. You always want to tell the story that exists, not a different story. It's like not. It couldn't. It may be a little bit of takeaway that stars aligning is important. So look for the stars. Okay. So just just do a little stargazing, see what supports there are, like what other, what's out there, because that is going to go a long way. Are there people on the ground? What assets do you have? Like, what people do you have to carry the project forward? What support do you have from economic development organizations? What municipal support do you have?
One of our biggest supporters was, of course, the Lenora Sliman, who was the organizer of the Seniors for Seniors. So we have a membership of about 250 people at that time that were starting to talk about what is the important issue in our community, and their objective was to find an apartment with no restrictions, an apartment that would allow pets, an apartment that would allow people to move in and help organize how it would run. Whereas they didn't have any options of that prior to that. If you smoked, you didn't get into an apartment in Brandon. If you had a pet, you didn't get into an apartment. So if you were a senior and it was time to downsize and move into something that was more economical for yourself, you had no place to go. CMHC refers to people in the low income brackets as virtually homeless. They say, maybe you can afford to stay in where you are, but if anything happens to that building, you are a homeless person all of a sudden because there's no place for you to replace it.
I'm glad you, sorry, go ahead.
And I wasn't homeless because I'm a carpenter, and I've only built five new houses for myself, but it was always because I was moving that I left it. Moving to another job and another opportunity that I used to away from that. And I spent a lot of time in the energy conservation business, which helped me understand the building science of what makes the building effective from an economical point of view. And knowing the construction costs, when a contractor said he wanted a whole bunch of money for something, I always had the ability to say, put my finger on my nose and say, I don't think we're going to spend that much money for that little bit.
So getting the right team is important. Takeaways. Somebody asked a question in the chat, but I'm just going to ask one question before it, and then we'll get to that question. So I want to talk about if you both have anything, like I know you do, but what would you have to share about sort of, I'm calling this right sizing the project. So whenever we talk about starting a business, we talk about right sizing it. So what's the correct size of the business based on the size of the market? So how, and I'm sure that there's other like data you can pull on and that kind of thing, but aside from just like going around with the clipboard, like literally counting people, like how do you make sure that you have a project that's sustainable? Are there like minimum thresholds that exist? It's like, okay, this is like, if it's 12 units, it's not worth it. I don't know, something like that. And that might be too technical for this time period, but I just want to see how you both went about finding the right kind of, size of the project based and type of housing, how you kind of match those things together. Monique, go ahead.
We had independent living apartments that were affordable for seniors, but then nothing after that. So we had pursued a personal care home for a number of years, trying to work with Manitoba Housing and the Manitoba government, and they just basically got to a point where they wouldn't fund that in our small region. And so the committee looked back to assisted living as the next step up that wouldn't require a lot of medical staff there. It could be staffed by local people and provide that next level of service to keep people in the region longer. And then, from there, freeing up those homes for new families. And so I think that's part of the way we're thinking about right sizing our entire housing market, because we have very tight vacancy rates for rentals of any kind. They are instantly snapped up, as well as even homes to purchase. We're an hour outside the nearest city, 2 hours from Winnipeg. And we found the one thing that was really, really helpful to confirming our business plan was the research piece of it. We received some funding for market research and spoke to many seniors in the region who really overwhelmingly saw the need for the project, and because they could see themselves living there. You know, they were in their upper 50s, 60s, into their 70s and 80s even, where they're fiercely independent. They want to keep living in their home as long as they can, but they saw a time when they would want to have more assistance, but stay in the area, not have to move away. I mean, my own parents had to move an hour away because there was no vacancy at the local independent living apartment. So they live an hour away now, which I'd love if they lived 5 minutes away, but but they don't. So this is certainly one of the options that we see to really impact our housing across the board for all types of residents.
In our case, we had 110 people sitting in a room for seniors saying we need to do something. It took very little effort and several of them sitting with their checkbook out and their pen ready to write a check. It wasn't very hard to encourage them to put their name down and say, this is what we think we need in the future. Then taking that information to the city and saying, how many suites can we put on this 0.8 of an acre, and get told there's 34 room for 32 or 34. It wasn't too hard to make the decision with the architect as to how many would be 1 bedroom and how many would be 2 bedroom, so that the cost of the whole project would be within the limits of what we were financially. And so using surveys, which are a pain in the neck, but have to be done on an individual basis, is the only way I think you can come up with a reasonable answer. Now the little co-op in Manitoba, Heritage Co-op in Manitoba, which I am a member of, have been for a long time, they decided they had 7 lots that they wanted to build on. So they put up 7 houses and sold them under the cooperative philosophy. But they were 2-bedroom houses, so that they could house a couple, give them a little extra space, and leave them independent. So it's quite a dark. You need a big dartboard and somebody that's good at throwing darts to come up with the answer. What does your community really need, and what will work?
It sounds like I guess your sort of comfort level notwithstanding, a good old fashioned kind of town hall situation sometimes is the way to go. Get everyone out and, okay, what are we going to do about this? That's actually brings me, somebody asked a question in the chat and said, how would a municipality start a housing co-op? So I think essentially what we're talking about with any project is like community-based project. I'm going to give an answer. I hope you laugh, is start a committee. Like, I'm sorry, that's the answer, but you need a dedicated group of people willing to take the project forward. And that committee can be supported by the municipality. Municipality can be part of it. And economic development can be part of it. Sometimes they're supporters, sometimes they're actually a member, but you need people sort of like the on the ground people also to be part of the committee. So that can be seniors themselves, it can be children of seniors, it can be people who are just interested in making something like this happen. There are a lot of ways to skin this cat. So we have other projects that are like even experimenting with multi-stakeholder methods where there is a level of involvement from, organizations like economic development and municipality, and then also from the level of the people who are benefiting from the services of the co-op. So if you're curious about this, so just say like, let's just put the pieces on the table and figure out how we can arrange them. And then Cindy asked a question about lifestyle or quality of life considerations that you found important. So Monique, I know your project isn't officially built yet, but if anybody has shared or if you've learned anything, what you found important, we mentioned pet friendly, other insights, and also like the sort of aspect of the community to sort of, combat people like feeling loneliness or isolated. So anything else to share on that aspect of like what is important for what you found to be important for the sort of like the actual like sort of day-to-day living in the in the actual co-op?
Yeah, I mean we're about 3,600. Well, my 2 municipalities that I work for are about 3,600 people in 3,600 square kilometers. So we are quite diverse. The RM of Piney has a dozen small communities, probably no more than 500 people was probably the top end of any one of our communities. And we are planning to build in one of the larger communities. So the amenities are there for people, banking, grocery store, faith organizations, community associations, our school and healthcare are located in Sprague, which is one of the big reasons it's planned for that location. But as far as design, so far we've been talking about making sure there's access to outdoors, so that each suite has maybe a small patio or some access to outside. I mean, we're a very rural community, and people grow up here being outdoors people. They farm and they're loggers and they're outdoor enthusiasts. So we want to make sure they can continue to do that, even on a smaller scale when their mobility might be impacted. But some of the other details on pets and stuff like that, we haven't quite determined that yet. Some people gave some very strong opinions in the phone research we did about whether pets or smokers or whatever should be allowed. So, we'll take that all into consideration as we get a little further down the road.
One of the amenities that we felt was very important here was to have a room large enough for all the residents to meet together, whether it was for a congregate meal or whether it was for a meeting or whether it was for more education or whether it was just a chance to get together to watch a picture show on the big TV. So we've included those things in our building. We've also included three smaller common rooms, which smaller groups can get together with and enjoy each other's company rather than have to go from suite to suite to suite. The big thing is that one thing I guess I'm enjoying is I planted a bunch of tomato plants in my raised garden bed. If you put a nice ripe tomato on a neighbor's doorstep, you never know what's going to come back to you in return. Could be a cupcake, it could be a lovely dessert, it could be a whole meal. And since I'm cooking for myself now, it's very, very important that I have that opportunity to share with the other neighbors in the building. And there's a couple of quotes I had come across. Winston Churchill said, courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And the other quote is from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that has ever changed the world in your area. A couple of just quotes I think that fit well if you're talking about getting into this business and sticking your head out and becoming the face of the community that wants a co-op housing development. Those are two things that you should print on your board and you watch on the wall so that you can go out every time you go out of the home, you can see them. Remind yourself that there's going to be times when you wish you hadn't, and there's going to be times when you're awful glad you did.
That's excellent. Send me those after and I'll include it with the email I send out to everyone. I think those would be good to keep in the forefront of your mind as you're working on a project like this. And I want to ask one last question of any other pieces of advice that you would give to somebody who is like in the position that you were in a number of years ago. So if you could, you're kind of giving it to your younger self here, maybe, and through that, you're sharing it with somebody who's maybe at an earlier stage, considering a project like this, or considering, like Harvey said, kind of being the face of an initiative like this in your community. Yes, it's going to take time, and it's going to take work. And, we heard about people standing in the snow and overseeing, this is a big commitment. So what would you say, what sort of, I don't know, any other last parting wisdom?
Yeah, I think that certainly we've talked about it before, getting that broad spectrum of perspectives at the table. We went with, a seniors housing nonprofit, a chamber of commerce, and the municipality as a starting point. And certainly we'll be engaging in members to join the board and take over the board. So we don't see that these three organizations will forever be the board of directors for this, that it will be a grassroots community organization. And I think to consult really meaningfully with the people involved, we got funding to hire a third-party consultant to speak with seniors in the region, to really dig deep on their opinions, including financial information. You know, what are you paying for housing now? What do you hope to pay in the future? That they probably wouldn't have shared if they had talked to us. We're their neighbors. You know, everyone knows everyone in a small town. And I don't think they want to share their financial information with their neighbors, but they will share it with a third-party consultant who keeps all the results just unidentifiable. We are looking for opportunities to speak with all levels of government. Obviously, our local municipality is supportive of the initiative. We've been talking to the province. They tend to focus their dollars on the larger centers, and being, you know, a much smaller rural community, we haven't had a lot of success, but you never know what can change, and keeping those lines of communication open is very, very helpful. And, you know, the last one is Cooperatives First is just an incredible resource in helping to navigate co-op options, how to set it up, what you hope your long-term objectives are, to get the right kind of co-op in place. And to work through those logistics. Like, they've got the training, they did board training with us so that our entire board knew what was expected, and they help us with ton of templates and resources. And so yay, Cooperatives First. Like, talk to them first. They are the go-to guys.
My recommendation is that after you have the dream, write the dream down and the objectives, and then approach your MP, your MLA, your mayor, your councillors, or other leaders in the community and ask them for a letter of support. It may have to sit in a file for a long time, but every application you make out for a grant, the more letters of support you can get from outside, from the community outside of your own group, the better chance there is of it working out. And there's an endless number of places that you can apply for grants, whether it's Lottery Foundation, whether it's a special group, a very well-off individual in the neighborhood who wants to leave his mark in the community by donating to some larger project. There's just, and even people that have grown up in your community and moved away are often very, very helpful if you can give them a good reason why they should send you a check for a couple of $100,000. And that's the secret of success, I'll tell you.
Getting your friends to send you a check. Yeah. Okay. Good advice. I'll take that with me. No. Excellent. Really great conversation. And I really want to thank you both so much for sharing that. And I hope that answered all the questions that people joining were looking for. If you have other questions, feel free to reach out. I know we have a little bit of time left. Oh, Tiffany Cameron wonder if Harvey, you have an official list of your friends, and then we could all just get in touch with them.
No, I'm keeping them to myself.
His friends are close. Don't worry. And his enemies are closer. I don't know. I just sorry. It felt like that quote. Yeah. So we do have a couple more minutes. So I'm just going to put us out into breakout rooms for a couple minutes. If you have to head out, that's perfectly fine. But I think it would be nice to connect with other people on the call. And so just a couple of people in a breakout room, maybe 4 or so. And I think the question to discuss is about just kind of to share about the housing needs that you found in your community. And also maybe to share with the other people in your group if you found any ways or how you're considering seniors housing options in your community, what the needs are, and maybe how you're addressing them or how you're considering addressing them, just to share a little bit of expertise with the other people. Or you could just say, like, I have no idea and we're just trying to figure this out, which is also totally fine. Which is why you're here, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to put that question in the chat, and I will be putting everybody in breakout rooms. Then I'll pull you back into the room here. Yeah, if you got to run, you got to run. That's all good. Just going to put everyone to give a chance to chat with a few other people.